And with all that, let's get started on our first session of the day, how and why to build a deliberate hybrid strategy for fall 2023. And it's also my pleasure to introduce our panel today. We have Joe Penegor, Talent Acquisition Manager at Ally, Shandro de Oliveira, Manager of Campus Recruiting Programs at United Airlines, and Mel Smith, Senior Talent Acquisition Manager of Early Talent at Milwaukee Tool. Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to getting started on our first question. So an impactful talent engagement strategy in 2023 combines the best of both worlds, the high touch, high conversion of face-to-face meetings, and the reach of diversity of scaled virtual events. The first question is going to go to Mel. So Mel, can you please walk us through how Milwaukee Tool has struck that balance, how you're mixing virtual and in-person events, and can you tell us how you plan info sessions and other events both in person and virtually?
Sure, of course. So at Milwaukee Tool, we really see value in both. So the in-person and then the virtual engagements as well. But obviously, it's important to find the right mix when you're building out your campus strategy. So what we found successful is prioritizing those impactful in-person engagements where we can attract potentially passive talent. For us, what that looks like is a lot of hands-on experiences. So we're primarily looking for engineers off campus. So we'll do tool-a-thons or tool demos, things like that early in the semester so that a student who may not have considered Milwaukee Tool can come and touch and feel the product and learn about kind of the engineering and the technology behind it. So really trying to target a student who may not have applied or even stopped by our career fair booth without having that interaction with us prior that sparked their interest. I kind of said this earlier, but timing of these things is critical. So obviously we all want to get on campus before the career fair. That's the goal. It's not always an option, but the earlier the better to ensure that we're catching them prior to an application deadline. On the other hand, we found that leveraging virtual options for either students who have already been engaged with us in the past and know about our brand or opportunities, or even for some of our smaller departments where we're really only trying to fill a handful of positions and the overall talent need is lower, has been really successful as well. So more for us in like a finance or sales support area, we're able to leverage virtual in a different way. Interviews is also an area that we've seen a ton of success with virtual and that shift as well. We're providing a lot more flexibility to both our hiring teams and students if we're able to get them through that hiring process faster through a video interview and not really feeling that we're losing a lot of that engagement as long as we're able to connect face-to-face virtually.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all really good insights and recommendations for the team. The second part of this question is going to go to Joe. Joe, can you describe the hybrid nature of your school partnerships? Meaning, are there schools that you primarily engage in person? Are there schools where you do a mix of virtual and in person? And are there schools that you have virtual only recruiting relationships with?
Yeah, so really, at Ally, we bucket our relationships with our schools into two main groups. So we have tier 1 and tier 2. And then those tier 1 schools are 16 schools that are near like our two main Ally hubs or one of our regional business centers. And the relationships with these schools are going to be primarily owned by the campus recruiting team. So these engagements naturally are going to be more in person since they're easy to get to. But that said, we do see the value in a hybrid approach, especially since more and more students are off campus nowadays. So we'll hold virtual events with these schools. These often will focus on specialty sessions like mock interview days. It could be a resume workshop. Something that really we try to get creative with our engagement. But when we're actually going to career fairs, we prefer to be on site for those. However, we do have our tier 2 schools, and the relationships with these schools are really owned by the business. So these might be schools that aren't necessarily near an Ally office, but pockets of the business do see value in tapping into them for their hiring. So they might go to these events with these schools more in person, but the campus recruiting team will engage with them more virtually. And with that said, we rarely, if ever, will work with a school virtually only because we really see the value in going with the hybrid approach.
Awesome, great insight, and love to hear about the tiered approach as well. Our next question is going to go to Chandro. So Chandro, if ever there was a company that could physically travel to visit a lot of schools, it would definitely be United. But campus teams know there aren't always enough boots on the ground to get to every school that you want to recruit from in person. So given United has a really strong brand presence, how does hybrid recruiting help you get strategic about prioritizing which schools you visit? And how does hybrid help you fill your funnel with quality candidates?
Yeah. Um, so just like you said, right? If ever there was a travel to visit lots of, well, we can physically travel to visit lots of schools. It's near impossible for us. Is really helpful in letting us virtually do just that, right? Be in multiple places at once. So we're able to then intentionally focus in person on those schools and programs that are important to our hiring priorities, where we already have established really strong relationships, and to those schools we're trying to make inroads at in particular, right? So we really focus a lot on those schools where we're trying to make more of an impact, while also being able to test out the waters at other schools via virtual engagement through career fairs, info sessions, coffee chats, and more. But also really seeing a lot of our already direct presence on campus. That virtual complement has really helped us to open the door to new talent that we might not otherwise have captured or connected with or been able to share a company with due to geographic barriers and just frankly not having enough boots on the ground. And really at the same time, it's helped us to increase, the diversity of our applicant pool as well. And when we think of diversity, right, not just, in terms of the population, but the geographic diversity of the schools we're reaching, the diversity.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'd love to hear about the different types of events that you host too, like info sessions and coffee chats. I think that's always a good recommendation for everyone. Our next question is, students are applying to more diverse locations in 2023 compared to previous years for both full-time and internship roles, with 71% of the class of 2023 willing to move to a different city for a job opportunity. This one is going to go to Joe. So Joe, you mentioned investing in person more heavily for some target schools and some of the tiers that you mentioned as well. How does your school strategy position Ally to gain the geographic reach that you need to attract the right talent to your jobs?
Yeah, no, great question. So our school strategy is primarily driven by a variety of factors, right? Location, programs and degrees offered, makeup of the student population, to name a few. But location really is the first factor that we're going to look at. We do appreciate the option to go in person a few times a semester. So the bulk of the schools that we work with are going to be near one of our two main Ally hubs or one of our 5 regional business centers. So the good news is that our regional business centers are in 5 separate geographic regions throughout the United States. So really we have a presence in all corners of the country. But as you said, students are more likely to relocate now more than in years past. So regardless of the school or the geographic region that we're recruiting in, we'll speak to the opportunities that we offer across the enterprise, regardless of location. We'll concentrate our efforts near an Ally location, but with the understanding that those students may be interested in a different Ally location across the country. So we want to be sure that we're being all encompassing in the opportunities that we're, presenting to them.
Awesome. Really great to hear. Thank you for that. And our next question is actually going to go out to the entire panel. In 2023 and beyond, all companies really are tech companies. I'm wondering how everyone uses Handshake to surface specific skill sets and has the ability to recruit virtually opened up new talent pools with skills that you're looking for. Like I said, we'll go through an answer for everyone, but I would love to start with Mel for this one.
Absolutely. So I think Joe and Chandro mentioned this as well in the last few questions, but our teams can only be so many places at once, and the campus season is so short, especially during that fall timeline. So for Milwaukee Tool, we are primarily a Midwest-based company. So we traditionally, similar to what the other panelists have said, we traditionally prioritize in-person engagements at Midwest colleges or schools that have a very, very targeted skill set that we're looking for. Sourcing campaigns, however, through Handshake have really allowed us to kind of hone in on specific skill sets and specific groups of talent from anywhere in the country. And it gives us an opportunity to connect with students at schools that we may have never met because we would never be at a career fair or had not prioritized it as an in-person engagement. So for example, one of our big critical needs is embedded systems or electrical engineering talent. Having the ability to source through Handshake, we essentially we refer to it as LinkedIn Recruiter for college students. So we're able to look for a grad date, a major, if they're willing to relocate, what student orgs they're able to or they've participated in, and really drill down and send targeted messages to a wide variety of students and a diverse group of students that, again, we wouldn't have met otherwise. And it's really helped us increase our talent pipeline for those high demand positions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mel. That's great to hear. We will now turn it over to Joe. Would love to hear about how the ability to recruit virtually opened up talent pools for you, maybe expanding into new skill sets that you're looking for. Curious to hear how Ally approaches using Handshake to surface those skill sets.
Yeah, so we really view Handshake as not only a megaphone to, allow us to communicate with student audiences, but also as a great way to filter down to the kind of specific talent that we're looking for. I think Mel said it best. The segments and campaign features and the sourcing campaigns within Handshake are a great way to really hone into specific skill sets. So we'll build out talent segments for specific majors. Could be, finance or business administration, for example. At specific schools such as our tier 1 target schools. And then you can even drill down to students who affiliate with underrepresented groups. So from there, we'll push out a campaign, with messaging to this audience, or host a virtual event such as a resume workshop. Like the ability to virtually recruit has certainly opened up new talent pools. I think after COVID, the world really realized the value of remote work and education. These days, many students live off campus and they attend school online. So these virtual events and campaigns allow us to reach an audience that would have otherwise been unavailable in person.
Definitely. Great point. Thank you so much for sharing some of that. And would now love to turn it over to Shandro, hear a little bit more about how you use Handshake to surface specific skill sets, and if the ability to recruit virtually has opened up some new talent pools for you as well.
Yeah, 100%. And totally agree with what Mel and Joe have already said. I think Handshake has been really great in helping us to not otherwise have had a chance to connect with, or we might not have even known existed, right? I think the segments and the campaign features within Handshake particularly have been helpful for us to really a lot of our applicant Mel said, right, for some of those harder to fill roles and to send home rebuild roles to send out might be a fit for those roles. But also, we go to a bunch of events and some of them aren't university specific, right? And so it really helps us also to reach that audience and be able to introduce them to the thought of working for an airline or to working at United, where they might not otherwise have even known we had opportunities that make sense for them, right? I think a lot of times students tend to think of an airline as only having opportunities for pilots and flight attendants, but there's so much more to that, right? And being able to campaign and source and reach out to these candidates to just tell them United's story and tell them what we have to offer has really helped us to open up that talent pool and introduce students to our pipeline who might not otherwise have thought of roles here.
Awesome. All really good insights. Thank you so much for sharing that. And our next question is going to go over to Joe. Joe, would love to hear how your hybrid strategy enables Ally to get creative with fairs and events. Hoping that you can share more about Moguls in the Making specifically, which is your highly successful virtual event, and then a highly successful in-person event from this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you're on campus, you're more than likely attending an event that the school has organized, such as a recruiting fair. But in a virtual environment, you have more power to be creative with your offerings. I think I touched on this earlier, but we like to do and host info sessions, on topics such as financial literacy, just telling them more about who Ally is as a company. We like to host resume workshops, mock interview sessions, all which, not only help with recruiting, but also to spread brand awareness. So we're able to socialize these events to student audiences virtually using Handshakes, campaign features, and events. Now, regarding Moguls in the Making, so Moguls is actually an on-site event, but it is an entrepreneurial competition that Ally holds annually with 60 students from 15 HBCUs. So this competition occurs over a 4-day period on-site at an Ally office. However, we do really lean on with Handshake to help us to socialize the application to these students. So we use it to spread awareness about the competition, receive applications, organize info sessions, just to give the students more information about the event and what to expect. So although the event itself is in person, Handshake is instrumental in us getting set up and organized for it. But an example of another highly successful in-person event would be, this past spring, we went to a local partner school for a computer science career fair. So for that, we brought representatives from our technology line of business, and it really was a hit with the students. Recruiters are always going to go to career fairs and do a great job of talking about the enterprise. But at the end of the day, students want to hear from people who are in the roles and in the careers that they're aspiring to, right? So we want to be really mindful to bring people from the business to our fairs. We find we have more success too when we go to specific career fairs instead of more general things, right? So in this instance, it was a career science fair rather than just a general career fair for the entire college. What we find is a wider net doesn't always yield the kind of talent that you're looking for.
Awesome. And you touched a little bit on this, but just to follow up, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how a hybrid strategy is helping Ally make progress towards its diversity hiring goals. If you have any metrics or tactics that you can share, how you leverage ERGs or advocates, would also love to hear that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, the hybrid approach allows you to be more inclusive off the bat, right? Because it's tailored to both students who live on campus and those who don't. So this was mentioned earlier, but again, the Handshake segments and campaign feature allows you to push out communications to students from underrepresented groups. So this allows us to address gaps in representation and ensure that we're being inclusive to a diverse candidate audience. We're also very mindful to include our ERGs in both our on-site and virtual events. Fortunately for us, all 8 of our ERGs are extremely motivated to help us and enhance the diversity of our employee population, and they're always quick to volunteer and to assist with a campus event, both on-site and virtually. A cool feature of Handshake that we like to use as well is the advocates feature. Members of our ERGs volunteer to serve as advocates as well, which aids us in our communications with the students that we're identifying on Handshake, and again, making sure that we're bringing a diverse audience to these type of events and communications, right? And when I say diverse, I mean people have different backgrounds at Ally, right? People who are in recruiting, people who work in the business, people in the ERGs. It allows us to have people talk to the students who come from a variety of perspectives here at Ally.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that. Our next question is focused on flexibility. So we know that Gen Z is looking for flexibility. They want to learn office norms and build their professional and social networks in person, but also want the option to work remotely. My question that's going to go first is for Shandro. Shandro, would love to hear how you have evolved your culture to meet students' expectations of hybrid work. So for example, do you have set days a week that teams come into the office? Do you have on-sites where early talent can interact with and meet employees of different levels in person? Would love to hear how you all have approached that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something to remember, right, being an airline, again, we're a 24/7 operation, and there's so many different moving pieces to us. So this, hybrid approach, it's really going to vary by work group. So for instance, right, a lot of our frontline groups are still very much on site. You can't be a flight attendant for home or load cargo onto our planes from your couch, as much as I wish we could, right? But the wide majority of our management administrative roles are hybrid. And typically, a lot of those are the roles that we are going to campus for, right? To fill for our internship program and early career entry level roles. We're in the business of connecting people. So prior to COVID, in-person work and collaboration was such a big priority for us on the corporate side of the house. obviously COVID shifted that approach as most in-office activity shut down. What we found in doing that, though, is we actually could accomplish a lot, if not more, of the same work that we did in person prior to the pandemic remotely. As we emerged from the pandemic, though, we also realized that we were missing out on a lot of the culture, community, and relationship building, something that's really important to what we do as a business. And we found, too, that early career talent, they want a mix of both, right? So we really leaned into the hybrid approach, which is a way to offer the best of both worlds, flexibility and in-person connection, right? So again, groups vary in what that hybrid schedule looks like, even at the corporate level, but many employees across the organization expect 2 to 3 days a week remote. And then we regularly do have meetups, and when organization connects folks are in the office to help facilitate a lot of networking and connection points and opportunities, again, when we are in the office. So it's been something that the pandemic has really helped us lean into, and something that we just are really excited about, being able to promote.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And Mel, I would also love to hear from you on this question, since Milwaukee Tool is primarily recruiting for in-person job roles.
Sure. So from a recruiting standpoint, first just talking about kind of how you message this to a student, right, during the process. So from a recruiting standpoint, I think it's really important not only to be upfront about the expectations of the role, but also the why behind the in-office versus hybrid versus remote requirement. Knowing that Gen Z is so focused on that flexibility, I think giving them the reasons and the benefits to one versus the other, depending on the position they're applying to, goes a really long way, especially for individuals that are just entering the workforce, some of which for the first time, or most of which for the first time. So what that looks like for Milwaukee Tool is a large percentage of the talent that we're recruiting for off of campus is falling within our engineering functions. These are individuals that work on cross-functional project teams, need access to technology and lab space and a lot of resources that we heavily invest in our corporate locations. So it's incredibly important for them to be on site, because similar to what Chandro shared, you can't do every single job from home, or at least you can't do it as well from home. And kind of walking them through those resources and the assets that we have available to them, I think immediately breaks down that wall and says, okay, yes, this makes sense. I'm coming in for a reason, not just because somebody wants to see me sitting at a desk. I think it's also really important to tie it back to the employee experience and just the community that they're joining when they're here. So since we are a company that is primarily on-site or hybrid, there's a lot of perks to coming in. We have a lot of company networking opportunities and engagement opportunities cross-functionally that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were the only remote employee. But again, it differs by function. We really focus on encouraging individuals to be on site based on the requirements of their role, but then offer and highlight that we offer a lot of flexibility for those that need a work from home day or need to have flexibility due to a family situation, or can have flexibility due to the nature of their work. The other thing that we have done is we have opened almost satellite locations. So we are primarily based in the Milwaukee area in southeastern Wisconsin. We've opened multiple corporate sites in southeastern Wisconsin, as well as just expanded into Chicago as well. So we are trying to go where there's talent and provide the same lab access and resources and technology for individuals who may not be willing to relocate here, which has been a huge win for us as well.
Awesome. And Mel, you actually touched on this a little bit, but I would love to hear from Joe regarding messaging and how you're messaging these opportunities. So Ally has been optimizing its messaging to better represent remote and hybrid opportunities. I'm wondering how you position this with your talent brand materials and outreach to students. So are you framing it, and do you consider it as a perk, or do you consider it a competitive advantage within your industry?
Yeah, certainly. We always want to be transparent about if a role is going to be on site, remote, or hybrid. As you mentioned, flexibility is important to Gen Z. So highlighting that a role is remote or hybrid is certainly a competitive advantage in attracting talent. So we make sure that our job descriptions include language that highlights the flexibility that a role may offer, as well as in our communication to students. Our marketing team does a great job of just enhancing and updating our talent brand materials, as seen by our series of, we have a marketing campaign for words that end with a suffix ally, so hyphen ALLY, such as virtually, right? So that really speaks to the virtual and hybrid culture that we have here. You'll often see that word in a lot of Ally brand materials. I think, Mel said it best, you really want to understand what's important to your target audience and make sure that you're leading with that, right? So highlighting any flexibility that your role offers is always a tremendous competitive advantage. And the way that we approach things is we always come back to the WIFM, the what's in it for me. We want to show students the value of, hey, this role does offer flexibility. Realize that's important to you, but here are also the advantages of coming on site as well. Aside from team camaraderie and the culture, like tangible things, right? Like, what are you going to learn on site? What resources will you have available to you in the office? So you want to make sure we're always being forthcoming with both those things in all of our brand marketing materials.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And I love the ally at the end. That is very creative, and I love that. Awesome. So I'd love to actually hear from Chandro next. Chandro, can you share how United is proactive and strategic about messaging students ahead of fairs and events that you're attending? So how are you using Handshake to get in front of candidates that you wouldn't have talked to, whether they are unfamiliar with the types of roles that they could find at United? Like you said earlier, you can't always do everything from home, but you do have quite a wide variety of opportunities available there that I'm sure students would love to know about. Would love to hear how you approach that if they aren't located in hubs or are constrained to meet you in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Love this question, right? I think, again, to your point, right? A lot of students tend to think we only hire pilots and flight attendants. We know that's just not true, right? But it's understandable, right? They're the face of any airline. There's so much more to us, right? We're a tech company, we're a logistics company, we're so much. We just happen to also fly planes. And so there are so many roles here at United that students just don't think about. And so, when we plan for events and career fairs that we're attending, whether it's at, on campus at one of our core schools, or whether it's a large conference like NSBE, we put a lot of planning into it. So we, proactively will go out there and build talent segments for the students at those schools or that are affiliated with those particular organizations and with the majors that we're particularly looking for, and send out campaigns, right, to really personally drive them to our booth and to let them know of some of the different opportunities that exist, right? So if we're at a NSBE, right, it's talking about the software engineering opportunities that we have, talking about those roles in our operation on the engineering side that we have, and really, asking them to come say hi, stop by the booth, to talk to us more about those opportunities and what it's like working at an airline. So those have been really successful for us. And what I really love to, just anecdotally, right, is when we do this, and NSBE in particular was a great example of this. We reached out to so many students, so many RSVP'd to come, see us at the event, and then to have them come to the event excited to talk to Matt or Annalicia because they reached out personally to them before the event, right? It's that connection point as well, and just kind of further helps to build on that relationship. So it's a really great way for us to really do a couple of things, right? Really maximize our potential when we're at events and optimize our time, and really drive traffic to our booth and ultimately our applicant pool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I love to hear that they're excited to meet you at the events, that they know the individual that reached out to them ahead of time, and that got them really excited. So thank you so much for sharing that. Would also love to kind of hear a little bit from Mel about this as well, in terms of the hybrid approach. Wondering if you can share how the shift to hybrid has helped your team achieve cost benefits, how you're tracking what you're saving by being intentional about virtual versus in-person recruiting. Would just love to hear your insights about Milwaukee Tool there.
Sure. So I think for this, we all know that obviously if you're not going somewhere in person, there's obvious cost savings benefits in terms of travel, the cost to host an event. I mean, even we all work in a campus function, right? Like the cookies you're throwing on the table and all of that goes into it. But for us, what we're seeing is the largest benefits from this hybrid approach is in our time to fill and our speed to offer for a candidate. So being able to attract a candidate through maybe an in-person engagement or a sourcing campaign early on in the semester, but then move much quicker through the offer process, given the flexibility that virtual interviews are offering both the hiring managers and the hiring teams and the students, has been a huge win for us in ensuring that we're setting up a really strong intentional campus strategy. And again, we're expanding our talent pool beyond maybe those 10 to 20 core campuses that we may have looked at traditionally in the past.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. And we have one more question that everyone is going to answer before we get into some of these really great Q&As that came through in the chat. So this one's going to go out to everyone. We can start with, I'll go, I guess, top to bottom. We can go Joe, Mel, and then Chandro. Would love to hear if you could give one piece of advice on how to build or update a hybrid early talent recruiting strategy. This can be based on lessons that you've learned or based on what you haven't tried yet on Handshake. What would you say? So what's that one piece of advice?
Yeah, I would say, don't be afraid to be creative and think outside the box. I mentioned a few of the things that we're doing with the resume workshops and so forth, but, play to your strengths, right? Like if you're a wealth management company, maybe you host a financial literacy session. If you're a law firm, maybe that's like a mock trial. Think about what differentiates your company from others, right? Like why should a candidate want to apply with you? And also don't be afraid to fail, right? There really are no failures. If something doesn't work, if there's not a great turnout or a great ROI, then that's going to influence your future decision making. So ultimately, think different, play to your strengths, and listen to your target audience.
I would say really important to understand the true goal of your campus strategy. So why are you going to the schools you're going to currently? And why are you going to them in person? Is it due to location? Is it due to a specific major skill set? What's the ROI you're looking for? I think if you sit down and do that, you may find that some that were added years ago prior to you maybe being in the role may no longer be serving the intended purpose when the relationship was started, and the needs of the company change as well. So start by looking at your current existing strategy and understand the ROI and the true goal. Once you understand that, it's much easier to lay in additional partners or build a robust sourcing strategy to supplement what already exists.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think to kind of cap it off, right? My advice would be like start planning early, right? It's easy to think too that because there's a virtual component to hybrid recruitment that it's something that can be implemented easy and with minimal effort, right? But we all know, don't let it fool you. There's so much that goes into it, and so much that goes into something that happen to really right. The planning process early, right, to help align it with your goals, really understand the goals of the event. Will just help from that the attendance you even get to the events you're planning.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everyone, so much for your insight today. Stick around because we have actually a little bit of time for some of those Q&A questions. If anyone feels like you want to jump in, please go ahead and jump in and answer the questions. We have the first one here is, being fairly new to Handshake, need advice. How do you determine your key schools? Do you look at statistics of majors that you would hire within? And do you start virtually or in person?
Yeah, so I can take that one. I think first and foremost, consider, what's going to be important to you. And I think for most campus recruiting teams, it's going to be geographic location. It's going to be the majors and degrees and programs that are relevant to your company, as well as the makeup of that student body. How many students are there? Is it a diverse, campus, et cetera? So I think that's a good starting point. And I would recommend, at least with our approach, we've primarily chosen partner schools that are within drivable distance, because we want the option to be able to go on site. Really, we use the virtual events to supplement that. So, we lean on in person, but we do virtual for the events that we want to host, right? Like those resume workshops and mock interviews, things of that nature. So I would use that as a starting point. Maybe consider. I'm not sure how large your company is, but it might make sense to consider a larger school with a higher graduate count. Or perhaps if you have more of a niche company, you should go for a niche school that maybe there won't be as much competition there. So I think those factors might depend on your company and really what you're looking for out of the students. But that's what I'd recommend from a starting point. I don't know if any of the others have anything to add to that.
The only thing I would add to it, I completely agree with everything Joe said. The only thing I would add is we've seen that the virtual space is a really good testing ground as well. So especially if you are recruiting for a larger company and you have that option to kind of look at your school strategy year over year, a lot of times what we'll do is we have a tier strategy, just like Joe or Shandro mentioned earlier in the call. We also added a digital tier. So we have a long list of schools that we will post at and do extensive sourcing campaigns at. And if we see that our hires just from those sourcing campaigns start to exceed some of our maybe tier 3 schools, we'll look at building an in-person partnership with them, regardless of where they are, because there's clear interest from the candidates and from the school to partner.
Awesome. And then I want to make sure that we get to at least these second and third questions that came through here. So I might do it a little bit rapid fire. The second question that came in is, when expanding your talent pool and looking into schools outside of your home office location, do you offer relocation? If so, what specifically are you offering, and how would you recommend starting that conversation within your organization?
Yeah, I can start again. I think that one, it's going to depend on the nature of the role, right? So like for our team, we recruit for both internships and early talent positions. So the early talent positions are true full-time roles with us. So some of those could, in theory, be eligible for relocation. Now, for the internships, those are going to be temporary in nature, right? Our internship is about 11 weeks in the summer. For that, we do offer a needs-based housing assistance program. And that has, it's taken some time and some refinement. What I would recommend with you is talk to your compensation partners. If you have a compensation COE within your HR department, they're a good place to start. I've met with them several times, and we just put our heads together because I will say for us, being able to, support our employees, whether they're interns or full-time, is important to us and part of our culture. So fortunately, we have, that culture here that we can lean on and get creative with our offerings. But I would recommend that as a place to start.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Next question that came in is, how do you tailor your recruiting plan to target diverse candidates with the hybrid and in-person approach? Again, open to anyone, whoever feels like they want to share.
Yeah, I can go. I think it's important to understand, what is the current state of the teams that you're recruiting on, right? What do the diversity makeups of those teams look like? Where are there gaps, or where are there room for improvement? So I think first it's having some self-awareness and understanding where you can get better, and then utilizing the functionality within Handshake to address that. I think a common theme throughout this webinar today was we've been talking about the campaign feature, and I really can't emphasize enough how influential the campaigns and the talent segments are for addressing that, because you can really hone your search down to the specific majors you're looking for at specific schools. There's a ton of filters, and one of them, being underrepresented groups. So you have an opportunity to directly push out messaging campaigns to those groups of people, which is going to help you and aid you in your diversity recruiting efforts. So really take a look at that. I will say the Handshake team has been extremely helpful for me in making the most out of just all the functionality, including the campaigns. So definitely that would be my recommendation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. And then the final Q&A question for today is, it's so difficult to offer the flexibility of hybrid and or remote work in our agency. We are a human services agency and have 24-hour staffing needs for a great number of clients. Let's see. What might you suggest that we could offer our staff as an alternative to make our positions more attractive?
I can speak to this a little bit since we have a lot of just in-person roles that we kind of touched on earlier. I think just to reiterate what I had shared in the earlier question, I think it's really important to ensure that they understand the benefits of coming in and why they're coming in. I think the biggest feedback you hear from employees that do have in-office requirements is, why am I sitting here? Why am I required to sit at this desk? What is the benefit to the company and to me? So making sure they understand the collaboration and the perks and the relationships they're building, and maybe why it's important for that role to be on site. But also it's a benefits package as well. So if you are requiring them to come on site, what if you live in a larger metro area, do you have any type of transportation assistance, or what are benefits you're offering to employees that have that? I mentioned Milwaukee Tools culture earlier. It's something that we feel very, very proud of and see as a pillar, one of the key pillars of our success. They are constantly investing back into employees, not only in learning opportunities, but in company outings or networking events and ERGs and things like that, where we're having the opportunity to collaborate outside of our cross-functional teams. And so it becomes really easy to kind of see the benefit to coming in and working in person. Whereas if you're coming in and sitting on a Teams call all day, that might be a little bit harder to explain.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you again to all of our panelists today. Joe, Mel, Chandro, really, really appreciate you being here. Loved hearing some of your insights, your best practices, some of the successes that you've seen on Handshake. Thank you for all of our attendees. We're going to have a short break before our next programming, so feel free to stick around. Just hop over into agenda afterwards, and you'll be able to see the rest of the day's activities. So thank you again so much, everyone, for today, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and hopefully you're going to be sticking with us and attending the next session as well.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.